I'm Natalie Thompson, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd own my childhood home before owning my father's respect. 10 years of building my real estate empire in secret while watching my brother drain my parents' finances had prepared me for many things. But nothing prepared me for that moment at Dad's 65th birthday party, surrounded by 40 guests, when he pointed his finger at me and snapped, "Sell your dream house. Your brother's loan isn't going to pay itself." If only he knew I was actually his landlord. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Growing up in our modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Pennsylvania, money was always a complicated topic. We weren't poor, but my parents, Robert and Sarah Thompson, constantly reminded us that every dollar mattered. Dad worked as a mid-level manager at a manufacturing plant, while Mom taught second grade at the local elementary school. Their incomes provided us stability, but little luxury. From my earliest memories, the difference in how my parents treated me versus my brother Jason was painfully obvious. Jason was 4 years older, athletic, and the spitting image of our father. I was bookish, practical, and apparently too much like my grandfather for my father's comfort. "Jason needs these new baseball cleats for his future," Dad would say, writing a check without hesitation. But when I needed a graphing calculator for advanced math, I got, "Do you really need the expensive one? Can't you borrow someone else's?" Mom was kind but frustratingly passive. I remember countless dinners where she'd serve Jason the largest portion of dessert without anyone acknowledging it. When I once pointed this out at age 12, Dad grounded me for creating drama. Mom later slipped into my room with an extra cookie and whispered, "Sometimes it's easier to keep the peace." Sweetie. My salvation came in the form of my grandfather, Dad's father, ironically enough. Grandpa William had built a modest fortune through careful property investments after returning from Vietnam. He saw something in me that my parents missed. "You've got a mind for numbers, Natalie," he'd tell me during our Saturday visits. "And more importantly, you understand the value of patience." When I was 15, Grandpa started teaching me about investing. We'd sit at his kitchen table reviewing stock reports and property listings. He showed me how compound interest worked using a simple calculator and a notebook. "This is the 8th wonder of the world," he'd say. "Those who understand it, earn it. Those who don't, pay it." Mom thought these lessons were cute. Dad thought they were a waste of time. "You're filling her head with pipe dreams," I overheard him telling Grandpa once. "Not everyone can do what you did. She needs practical skills." Grandpa just smiled that knowing smile of his. "Robert, your daughter has more practical sense in her pinky finger than most adults have in their whole body. You just don't see it yet." The darkest day of my young life came shortly after my 18th birthday. Grandpa suffered a massive heart attack while tending his garden. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. At the funeral, I stood between my parents, feeling utterly alone despite the physical proximity. 2 weeks later, the family was called to the reading of the will. To everyone's surprise, Grandpa had left me $50,000 in a separate trust. Dad was livid. "What were you two planning behind my back?" he demanded on the silent car ride home. "Nothing, Dad. He just wanted to help with my college. Jason could use help with his college debt too, you know. He's struggling with those loans." Mom placed her hand on his arm. "Robert, that was William's decision. It's Natalie's money." That night, I made a promise to myself and to Grandpa's memory. I would use this gift wisely. I would build something that no one, especially my father, could take away from me. The breaking point came when I was 19. I'd been accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, planning to study business and finance. Dad had other ideas. "Education is important, but you need something practical to fall back on," he insisted over dinner. "Your cousin Beth is doing really well as a dental hygienist. 2 years of school, steady paycheck." "I don't want to be a dental hygienist, Dad." I want to study business. Business? He laughed, actually laughed. What do you know about business? More than you think, I replied quietly. Listen, Natalie, he said, setting down his fork. We don't have money to waste on fancy degrees that won't lead anywhere. If you want to go to college, you need to be practical. Grandpa believed in me. His face darkened. My father had unconventional ideas. That doesn't mean they were right. He built something from nothing. He understood money. And yet here you are, asking us to pay for your education, he snapped. That was the moment. The moment everything crystallized for me. I'm not asking you for anything, I said, standing up from the table. I never have. And I never will again. 2 weeks later. I moved out with my inheritance safely in a separate bank account. I found a tiny studio apartment, enrolled in business classes, and got a job waiting tables. The look on Dad's face when I handed him my new address is something I'll never forget, shock mixed with something almost like respect, quickly replaced by his usual dismissal. Over the next few years, the pattern continued. Jason bounced from job to job, always with new schemes that required just a little help from our parents. A food truck that lasted 3 months. An online sports memorabilia business that resulted in a garage full of unsold inventory. A partnership in a friend's landscaping business that fell apart when winter came. And every time, Dad would bail him out. Mom would call occasionally, always when Dad wasn't home, to check on me. Your father does love you, she'd insist. He just doesn't understand you. I stopped trying to make him understand. Instead, I focused on building my own life, one careful decision at a time. With Grandpa's $50,000, I had options. But I knew I needed to be strategic. Unlike my brother who saw money as something to spend, I saw it as a tool to build with. I allocated $30,000 for my education, lived off my waitressing job, and set aside the remaining $20,000 as seed money for future investments. My first 2 years at State University were a blur of classes, work shifts, and self-education. While other students partied, I studied market trends and property values. I graduated with a business degree in 3 years instead of 4 by taking summer classes, saving both time and money. My entry into real estate came through the back door. I'd been working at an upscale restaurant frequented by local business people when I served Eleanor Winters, the owner of a successful real estate investment firm. Instead of just taking her order, I asked intelligent questions about a property deal I'd overheard her discussing. You know about cap rates? She'd asked, eyebrow raised. Yes, ma'am. And cash-on-cash returns, appreciation potential, and the importance of location variables. 2 weeks later, I was working as her assistant for slightly above minimum wage, but the real compensation was the education. Eleanor became the mentor I desperately needed. A self-made success in her 50s. She had navigated a male-dominated industry with a combination of brilliance, tenacity, and strategic thinking. Men in this business will pat you on the head and call you sweetheart right before they try to screw you on a deal, she warned me early on. Never show that it bothers you, but never forget it either. Under Eleanor's guidance, I learned how to analyze properties, negotiate deals, and manage renovations. By day, I worked for her. By night, I waited tables to build my savings. I lived in a shared apartment with 2 roommates, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and put every spare dollar aside. At 25, I made my first independent investment using the $20,000 I'd saved from Grandpa's inheritance plus another $30,000 I'd accumulated. It was a small, distressed duplex in a transitional neighborhood. The property needed work, but the location had potential. I did much of the cosmetic renovation myself on weekends, working alongside contractors I hired for the specialized work. 6 months later, I had 2 reliable tenants and positive cash flow. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Eleanor was impressed enough to offer me a junior partner position at her firm. You've got the hunger, she told me. And more importantly, You've got the discipline. That's rare. The next 5 years were transformative. I continued living well below my means while my investment portfolio grew. By 30, I owned interests in 12 properties, had 4 complete ownership positions, and had established my own small investment company while maintaining my partnership with Eleanor. The real estate world wasn't always welcoming. I can't count the number of times I was mistaken for an assistant rather than the principal at meetings. Male property owners would direct their comments to my male contractors rather than to me. Lenders would ask if my husband would be co-signing the loan. Each slight fueled my determination. I worked harder, prepared more thoroughly, and gradually built a reputation for shrewd but fair dealing. My specialty became identifying undervalued properties in neighborhoods poised for revitalization. I wasn't just lucky. I researched city development plans, school improvements, and commercial investments that signaled upcoming changes. Through it all, I kept my success private from my family. It wasn't about deception, but self-preservation. I knew that if my parents and Jason realized the extent of my financial success, the dynamics would shift in ways I wasn't prepared to handle. Dad would either dismiss my achievements or, worse, see me as a solution to the ongoing financial problems created by my brother's failures. At our infrequent family dinners, I deflected questions about my work with vague references to doing okay in real estate. If they pictured me as a modestly successful agent showing houses to couples on weekends, that was fine with me. The truth, that I now had a 7-figure net worth and controlled millions in property assets, would have changed everything. My business philosophy evolved from those early lessons with Grandpa, refined by Eleanor's mentorship and my own experiences. Money wasn't the goal, independence was. Financial freedom meant never having to compromise my values or bend to someone else's expectations. Each property in my portfolio represented not just equity, but options, the ability to choose my own path without constraint. Looking back, I realized that what drove me wasn't just ambition, but a deep need to prove my worth, not to my father, but to myself. Each successful deal was a silent rebuttal to every dismissive comment. Every time I'd been overlooked in favor of my brother, I wasn't just building wealth, I was building the foundation for a life where I would never again feel powerless or invisible. The call from Mom came on a rainy Tuesday in April, 3 years ago. Her voice had that forced cheerfulness that always meant something was wrong. Everything's fine, she insisted before I even asked. We're just making some changes. After some gentle probing, the truth emerged. Mom and Dad were losing the house. They'd fallen behind on mortgage payments after helping Jason cover the fallout from his latest failed venture, a premium dog food delivery service that had collapsed, leaving them with significant debt. It's just a house, Mom said, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. We can find an apartment. That house, despite being the setting for many painful memories, was still the place where I'd played in the sprinkler on summer days, where Grandpa had taught me about investing at the kitchen table, where Mom had tucked me in with stories and quiet encouragement. The thought of my parents being forced out in their 60s hit me harder than I expected. After hanging up, I sat in my office overlooking the city and weighed my options. I could offer financial help directly, but that would expose my financial situation and likely result in ongoing expectations. I could do nothing, letting them face the consequences of their choices and Jason's irresponsibility. Neither option felt right. The solution came to me that night. I created Thompson Heritage Properties, LLC, a shell company with no public connection to me. Through this entity, I purchased my childhood home at the foreclosure auction for $320,000, slightly above market value to ensure no competing bids. Then, through a property management company I sometimes worked with, I offered my parents a lease at 20% below market rate. The manager explained that the anonymous investor understood their situation and wanted to help a couple in their 60s stay in their home. It's a miracle. Mom told me over the phone afterward. Some investor bought the house and is renting it back to us at a rate we can actually afford. Your father thinks it might be someone from his old union, doing us a favor. That's wonderful, Mom, I said, suppressing a smile. You deserve some good luck. For the next 2 years, this arrangement worked perfectly. My parents made their rental payments on time, unaware that those checks were ultimately coming to me. I was able to help them maintain their dignity while protecting my own boundaries. The property management company handled any maintenance issues, keeping my involvement completely hidden. What I hadn't anticipated was how Jason would react to our parents' changed circumstances. Rather than recognizing their financial vulnerability, he seemed to view the situation as an opportunity to extract even more help. 6 months after they began renting, Jason approached them about investing in a food truck collective. For months after that, it was a drop shipping business. Each venture required just a little seed money that somehow always came from our parents' dwindling retirement savings. I watched this pattern continue with mounting frustration. During our occasional family gatherings, I would see new stress lines on Mom's face, notice Dad looking more stooped and tired. Meanwhile, Jason would arrive with grand stories about his latest business idea, oblivious to the cost of his repeated failures. You could talk to your brother, Mom suggested once. When we had a rare moment alone, would he listen? I asked. Has he ever? She sighed. Probably not. But your father won't stop helping him. He says Jason just needs one good break. And what about your retirement? Your future? We'll manage, she said with that same forced smile. We always do. I didn't tell her that they managed because I was subsidizing their housing costs. I didn't mention that my property management company had reported Jason staying with them for 3 months last year when he couldn't make rent on his own place. I kept my silence and my distance, uncertain how long this delicate balance could last. Owning my childhood home gave me complicated satisfaction. There was something poetically just about it. The house where I'd felt like a second-class citizen was now mine. Every time Dad complained about the landlord not replacing the water heater fast enough or upgrading the countertops, I had to suppress a laugh. But there was sadness too. I'd built this elaborate deception because direct honesty seemed impossible. Our family dynamics were so distorted by years of favoritism and enabling that normal communication didn't work. Sometimes I wondered what Grandpa would think of my solution, whether he'd see it as clever financial planning or a sign of how broken our family had become. As my parents settled into their new status as renters and Jason continued his cycle of entrepreneurial failures, I focused on growing my business. I expanded into commercial properties, established a scholarship for young women interested in finance and real estate, and even began mentoring several promising students from my old university. My personal life developed a comfortable rhythm. I dated occasionally but prioritized my independence. My closest friends were other self-made professionals who understood my drive. Eleanor and I had dinner monthly, where she increasingly treated me as an equal rather than a protege. Life was good, stable, predictable. Then came the invitation to Dad's 65th birthday party. Mom insisted it would be just family and a few close friends at the house. I agreed to attend, expecting the usual awkward small talk and early departure. I had no idea I was walking into a confrontation that would finally bring 10 years of hidden truths to the surface. Dad's 65th birthday party was set for the last Saturday in June. I arrived deliberately 20 minutes late, carrying a modestly wrapped gift certificate to his favorite steakhouse. The backyard of my childhood home, my property, though no one knew it, was decorated with blue and white streamers and balloons. A large, happy 65th, Robert banner hung from the maple tree I'd climbed as a child. The crowd was larger than Mom had indicated. At least 40 people milled around the yard, a mix of family, neighbors, and Dad's former coworkers. I recognized aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. all balancing paper plates and plastic cups while making the obligatory small talk that defines such gatherings. Dad had aged visibly since I'd last seen him at Christmas. His hair was now completely gray, his posture slightly stooped. He stood near the grill, holding court with several of his old union buddies, laughing too loudly at jokes I couldn't hear. Mom bustled between guests, refilling drinks and urging people to take seconds, her social smile firmly in place despite the tension lines around her eyes. And then there was Jason, now 40. Still boyishly handsome despite a thickening waistline. He moved through the crowd with practiced charm, slapping backs and kissing cheeks. The golden child. Still glowing in the reflected light of our father's approval, despite a decade of failures. Natalie, you made it. Mom spotted me and hurried over, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of her familiar lavender perfume and the faint hint of stress sweat. I was beginning to worry. Traffic, I lied smoothly. In truth, I'd sat in my car around the corner for 15 minutes, gathering the emotional energy to face my family. Quite a turnout. Your father has a lot of friends, she said, with a proud smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Come say hello to everyone. Aunt Patricia's been asking about you. I slipped into my well-practiced role, the polite, somewhat reserved daughter who had a nice little career in real estate. I fielded the usual questions with practiced ease. No, not married yet. Business is steady, thanks for asking. Still living in the city. No plans for children at the moment. Each answer received the same slightly disapproving nod, especially from the older relatives who measured success in wedding rings and baby photos rather than investment portfolios. An hour into the party, I was nursing my second glass of white wine and chatting with my cousin Beth. Yes, the dental hygienist Dad had once held up as my ideal career model when Jason cornered me by the cooler. Hey, sis, he said, giving me a one-armed hug that sloshed my wine dangerously close to the rim of the glass. Long time no see. Hi, Jason. How are you? Can't complain, can't complain. His smile was confident, but I noticed a certain desperation around his eyes. Actually, I've got something exciting in the works. Wanted to run it by you, get your professional opinion. Here it comes, I thought. The pitch. I'm partnering with this tech guy to develop an app for connecting local farmers with restaurants, he continued, not waiting for my response. Farm to table, cutting out the middleman. It's gonna be huge. Sounds interesting, I said neutrally. The thing is, we need some capital to finish the development. I thought, since you're in real estate, you might want to get in on the ground floor. 20,000 gets you a 5% stake. I took a slow sip of wine. I don't really do tech investments, Jason. It's not my area of expertise. His face fell slightly before he rallied. No problem, no problem. Just thought I'd offer. Family first, right? He glanced across the yard. Mom and Dad are helping out a bit, but they're kind of stretched thin these days. Something in his casual tone set off alarms. They're helping you with this app? How much are they investing? Not much, he said, suddenly very interested in his beer label. Just a small loan to get things moving. I excused myself and made my way to where Mom was arranging a tray of cupcakes. Is Dad giving Jason money for some app idea? I asked quietly. Her hands fumbled, nearly dropping a cupcake. It's not that much, honey. Your father believes in supporting Jason's entrepreneurial spirit. Mom, they can barely afford the rent. Where is this money coming from? She wouldn't meet my eyes. Your father is taking out a small loan. Against what? They don't own any assets. Well, the bank says we've built up some equity as renters, and with your father's pension as collateral. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They were trying to take out a loan against my house, a house they didn't own, to fund another of Jason's doomed ventures. Before I could respond, Dad's booming voice called everyone to attention for a toast. I stood at the edge of the crowd, mind racing as Dad thanked everyone for coming. Then he did something unexpected. He called Jason to stand beside him. I also want to toast my son, he said, clapping Jason on the shoulder. Who's about to launch an exciting new business? Your mother, and I couldn't be prouder. Scattered applause and congratulations followed. I remained silent, watching as Dad continued. Starting something new takes courage and capital. He went on. We're doing our part to help, taking out a little loan against the house. He chuckled. At my age, what's one more bill, right? Several of his friends laughed knowingly. I felt my chest tighten. Dad, I said, the word escaping before I could stop it. Can I talk to you about that? He squinted at me across the yard. About what, Natalie? About the loan. For Jason's app. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. This isn't really the time, honey. I think it's exactly the time, I persisted. Aware of conversations dying around us as people sensed conflict. Before you take out a loan against a house you don't own, a confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Dad's face reddened. What are you talking about? We may rent now, but we have tenants' rights. That's not how loans work, Dad. You can't borrow against property you don't own. Jason stepped forward. Natalie, maybe you should back off. This isn't your business. Actually, it is. The words hung in the air between us. Dad's expression hardened. Is this jealousy, Natalie? Because your brother is starting a business and we're supporting him. No, Dad. It's concern. You can't afford another of Jason's failures. The backyard went completely silent. Jason's face flushed dark red. Who the hell do you think you are? Dad pointed his finger at me, voice rising. You've always been like this. Always thinking you know better than everyone else. While your brother is out there taking risks, building something, what are you doing? Living in some overpriced apartment, showing houses to rich people. I stood very still, letting his words wash over me. 10 years of assumptions, misconceptions, and dismissal concentrated in one tirade. You want to talk about responsibility, he continued. How about family responsibility? Your brother needs help with a legitimate business opportunity. If you had any real success, you'd be offering to help instead of criticizing. Then came the moment that would change everything. Dad's face contorted with a mixture of anger and righteousness as he jabbed his finger toward me. Sell your fancy dream house if you have to. Your brother's loan isn't going to pay itself. A strange calm settled over me. The irony was too perfect. Dad, I said softly, I don't have a dream house to sell. Then what's the problem? He demanded. The problem is that you're trying to take out a loan against my house. Confusion replaced anger on his face. What are you talking about? This house, I said, gesturing around us. The one we're standing in right now. I own it. I've owned it for 3 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Every face in the backyard turned toward me in shock. That's impossible, Jason finally sputtered. Some investor bought it at foreclosure. Yes, Thompson Heritage Properties. I met his gaze steadily. My company. Mom's hands flew to her mouth. Natalie, is this true? It's true, Mom. When I heard you were losing the house, I bought it through a shell company and arranged for you to rent it at below market rate. I own this house. Not Dad. Not the bank. Me. Dad seemed to physically shrink before my eyes. Why wouldn't you tell us? Would you have accepted my help if you'd known? Or would your pride have gotten in the way? He had no answer. I've been subsidizing your housing for 3 years while watching you drain your savings to fund Jason's schemes, I continued. And now you want to take out a fraudulent loan against my property to give him more money. Jason took a step toward me. You had no right to hide this from us. And you have no right to keep taking from them, I countered. They're in their 60s, with almost nothing saved for retirement because of you. Dad found his voice again. How dare you speak to your brother that way? After all we've done for you. That was it, the final push I needed. All you've done for me. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. I left home at 19 with nothing but Grandpa's inheritance. Everything I have, I built myself. Without your help. Without your approval. Without your notice. I turned to face the silent crowd of relatives and family friends. I own this house. I own 12 other properties. I run a successful investment firm. I've achieved everything you told me I couldn't. Then I looked back at my father, suddenly feeling more sad than angry. And if you're going to try to take out fraudulent loans against my property to fund another of Jason's failures, then I guess you should start packing. You've got 30 days to leave. The collective gasp was audible. Mom began to cry. Jason started shouting. But I was already walking away, past the shocked faces, past the abandoned gift table, past the happy birthday banner now sagging in the afternoon heat. I got into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of my father in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the driveway, looking suddenly old and lost. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. But maybe it was the only way it could have happened. The drive home from my parents' house was a blur. I remember stopping at a red light and realizing tears were streaming down my face. I wasn't even sure why I was crying. Relief? Regret? The release of a decade of pent-up emotions? By the time I reached my actual home, a comfortable but not extravagant 3-bedroom condo overlooking the river, I had 17 missed calls and 26 text messages. I ignored them all, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto my couch. What had I done? The practical part of my brain reminded me that I'd simply stated facts. I did own the house. My parents and Jason had been taking advantage of my anonymous generosity. Any reasonable person would agree I had every right to expose the truth when faced with their attempt to take out a fraudulent loan. But families aren't reasonable. And despite years of emotional distance, these were still the people who had shaped me, for better or worse. The first person I called was Eleanor. She listened without interruption as I explained the situation, then sighed deeply. Well, you've certainly made a statement, she said. Question is, what do you want to happen now? I don't know, I admitted. I was so angry. I didn't plan any of this. In my experience, she said carefully, family conflicts about money are rarely just about money. What did you really want from them, Natalie? The question hit me like a physical blow. What did I want? Appreciation? Respect? Love that wasn't contingent on being like Jason? I just wanted them to see me, I whispered. Really see me. Well, Eleanor said dryly, they certainly see you now. By Sunday morning, the missed calls had doubled. Most were from Mom. A few from Jason, none from Dad. I finally listened to the voicemails while making coffee. Mom's messages progressed from tearful pleas to return her calls, to confused questions about the house situation, to worried inquiries about whether I actually intended to evict them. Jason's messages started with angry accusations about my ambush at the party, then evolved into awkward attempts at reconciliation that still somehow framed him as the victim. I was considering which message to respond to first when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Mom, looking small and tired in a cardigan despite the summer heat. How did you find my address? I asked after letting her in. Your cousin Beth. She looked up your real estate license information. Mom glanced around my condo, taking in the floor to ceiling windows, the modern art, the subtle signs of success I'd never shared with my family. This is beautiful, Natalie. Thank you. Would you like some coffee? She nodded, perching tentatively on a bar stool at my kitchen island. For a moment, we were silent as I prepared 2 mugs. I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she accepted hers. I don't understand, she finally said. Why didn't you tell us? About the house? Or about everything else? Any of it. All of it. Her eyes searched my face. We're your family. Are we, Mom? Really? I sat across from her. When's the last time Dad asked about my life? My work? When's the last time either of you saw me as something more than Jason's little sister? She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've spent my entire life making excuses for why Dad favors Jason. You've watched him pour your retirement savings into one failed venture after another. And not once, have you stood up and said, enough. Tears filled her eyes. It's complicated, Natalie. Your father believes in supporting his children. His child. I corrected gently. Singular. He supports Jason. He tolerates me. That's not true. He loves you. Maybe he does. But not the way he loves Jason. Never equally. She stared into her coffee. I should have done more. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of the inequality I'd ever heard from her. Something tight in my chest loosened slightly. Yes, I agreed. You should have. Do you really intend to evict us? She asked quietly. I don't know, Mom. I was angry. I said things I hadn't planned to say. Your father's devastated. He won't admit it, but he is. Because I own the house? Or because I embarrassed him in front of his friends? She had no answer for that. Later that same day, Jason showed up unannounced. Unlike Mom's subdued approach, he pounded on my door and pushed past me as soon as I opened it. Nice place, he said, looking around with a mixture of admiration and resentment. Must be nice to have been secretly rich while watching Mom and Dad struggle. That's rich coming from the reason they've been struggling, I replied. How much have they given you over the years, Jason? How many of your sure things have they funded? They wanted to help me. That's what families do. They help each other. No, that's what they do for you. The rules have always been different for me. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Is that what this is about? Some childhood grudge? You're willing to make our parents homeless because Dad liked me better? They won't be homeless. I have no intention of actually evicting them. Relief crossed his face, quickly replaced by calculation. So the app funding is absolutely not happening. I interrupted. Not with my money, and not with theirs. They have nothing left to give you, Jason. Nothing. You don't understand the opportunity. I understand opportunity better than you ever will, I said firmly. I also understand risk, return on investment, and the definition of insanity as doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results. His face flushed. You think you're so much smarter than everyone else. No, just more responsible. He left in a huff, slamming the door behind him. I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Jason had spent too many years as the family golden child to accept this reversal of fortune easily. Over the next week, the family drama expanded beyond our immediate circle. Relatives took sides, with opinions divided largely along generational lines. Older family members thought I was being cruel and disrespectful. Younger cousins secretly reached out to express admiration for my success and standing up to Dad. Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, surprised me with a supportive phone call. I've watched Robert favor that boy for 30 years, she said. Maybe this needed to happen. Uncle Dave, Dad's younger brother, stopped by with a six-pack and an awkward attempt at mediation. Your dad's proud, Natalie. Always has been. But he's getting older. Might be time to extend an olive branch. Meanwhile, social media amplified the family division. Cousin Megan posted a cryptic Facebook status about toxic family secrets that garnered 50 comments speculating about what had happened. Jason's wife, Kara, shared a long post about family loyalty that was clearly directed at me, though it didn't mention names. Through it all, my father remained silent. No calls, no texts, no attempts at contact. His absence spoke volumes about the true nature of our relationship. When faced with the reality of my success and independence, he chose distance over reconciliation. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office and inspecting potential new properties. Eleanor watched this with concern. You're hiding, she observed over lunch. 3 weeks after the party. Using work to avoid dealing with your family situation. I'm not hiding. I'm processing. She raised a skeptical eyebrow. And have you decided what you're going to do about the house? I sighed. I'm not going to evict them. I was angry, but I'm not cruel. So back to the status quo? Anonymous landlord. Subsidized rent, enabling Jason's next scheme. Her question hit me like a splash of cold water. Was I really willing to return to the old pattern? Had anything actually changed? No, I said slowly. Something needs to be different. This can't continue. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like the businesswoman I trained. When a situation becomes untenable, you don't avoid it or revert. You restructure. That night, I sat at my dining table with a legal pad, thinking about what restructuring my family relationships might look like. By midnight, I had a plan. Not perfect, probably not even fair by normal family standards, but clear, honest, and long overdue. 3 days later, I sent identical emails to my parents and Jason, inviting them to dinner at my condo the following Saturday. I specified that this would be a discussion about moving forward regarding the house and our family relationships. I requested that everyone come prepared to listen as well as speak. Mom replied within minutes, expressing relief and gratitude. Jason took 6 hours to respond with a terse, "I'll be there." Dad didn't acknowledge the invitation at all, but Mom assured me he would attend. I spent the intervening days preparing. I consulted with my attorney about creating a formal, transparent rental agreement. I spoke with my financial advisor about establishing boundaries while still providing appropriate support for my aging parents. I even had 2 sessions with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics, trying to clarify my own emotions and expectations. By Saturday evening, my dining table was set for 4. A neutral space where we could begin to rebuild, or perhaps build for the first time, an honest relationship. I ordered catering from an upscale Italian restaurant, opened a good bottle of wine, and waited. They arrived together, exactly on time. Mom entered first, greeting me with a cautious hug. Jason followed, his expression guarded. Dad came last, his face unreadable as he took in my home with quick, assessing glances. "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing toward the living room where I'd arranged drinks and appetizers. I thought we could talk a bit before dinner. We settled awkwardly, my parents on the sofa, Jason in an armchair, me perched on the edge of my reading chair. For a moment, no one spoke. "This is a lovely place, Natalie," Mom finally offered. "Thank you. I've been here about 4 years." Another silence. I realized they were waiting for me to set the tone. This was, after all, my meeting. "I want to start by apologizing for how everything came out at the party," I began. "That wasn't planned, and I regret the public nature of it." Dad shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. That said, I don't regret the truth coming to light. It needed to. I took a deep breath. I bought the house because I couldn't bear to see you lose it. I kept my ownership secret because I knew it would complicate our already complex family dynamics. "You could have told us," Jason interjected, "given us the choice. Would you have accepted my help if you'd known?" I asked Dad directly. He met my eyes for the first time that evening. "Probably not," he admitted gruffly. "That's why I did it the way I did. But the situation has become unsustainable. The pattern of bailing out Jason at the expense of your financial security can't continue." Jason started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I've prepared some documents I'd like us to discuss." I retrieved a folder from the side table. "This is a formal rental agreement for the house, transparent, legal, and still below market rate. I'm willing to continue renting to you, Mom and Dad, with these terms." I passed them the paperwork. Mom accepted it, but Dad didn't reach for it. "There are conditions," I continued. "First, no loans or financial encumbrances can be attempted against the property. Second, any major financial decisions that might affect your ability to pay rent need to be discussed in advance." "You're talking about controlling our finances," Dad said, breaking his silence. "At our age." "I'm talking about establishing boundaries that protect everyone," I corrected. "Including you." I turned to Jason. This also means no more family funding for business ventures without proper business plans, accountability, and return expectations. So I'm cut off, he said bitterly, while you sit in your fancy condo playing landlord. No, you're being treated like an adult. I handed him a separate document. This is a different proposal. If you're serious about this app idea or any other business, I'm willing to review a proper business plan. If it has merit, I might consider a structured investment, not a gift, not a loan, but a proper investment with terms, milestones, and accountability. His eyes widened in surprise. This clearly wasn't what he'd expected. Why would you do that? He asked suspiciously. Because despite everything, you're my brother. And because sometimes people need a chance to prove themselves, but with the right structure and expectations. Mom was reading through the rental agreement, her expression thoughtful. These terms seem very fair, Robert, she said to Dad. More than fair, actually. Dad still hadn't touched the document. This isn't how family is supposed to work, he said, voice tight with emotion. Parents help children, not the other way around. Sometimes it works both ways, I said gently. Sometimes children grow up and can help their parents. There's no shame in that. There is when it's done behind my back. He suddenly erupted, standing up, making me a charity case in my own house. That wasn't even my house anymore. Robert, Mom said sharply, with more authority than I'd heard from her in years. Sit down. To my astonishment, he did. For 30 years, she continued, I've watched you favor Jason over Natalie. I've made excuses, kept the peace, tried to make up for it in small ways. But I'm done pretending this hasn't hurt our family. Dad stared at her in shock. Sarah. No, you need to listen. Her voice trembled, but remained firm. Our daughter built herself a successful life without our help. She saved our home when we were about to lose it. And instead of acknowledging that, you're angry that she wounded your pride. It's not that simple, he protested. It is that simple, she insisted. And if you can't see that, if you can't acknowledge how unfair you've been all these years, then I'll sign this rental agreement alone. And I'll be living in that house alone too. The silence that followed was deafening. I'd never heard Mom issue an ultimatum to Dad. From Jason's wide eyes, neither had he. Dad sat frozen, looking suddenly older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I didn't know how to relate to you, he said, looking at me. Jason was easy. Sports, cars, things I understood. You were always in your head, always questioning, always seeing things differently. Just like my father. Grandpa, I said softly. He nodded. We didn't get along either. He thought I wasn't living up to my potential. I thought he was a cold, calculating businessman who valued money over people. He swallowed hard. When you started showing the same traits, I pushed you away. Dad, let me finish. When you moved out at 19, part of me was proud. Terrified for you, but proud. You had the courage to do what I never did. Stand on your own. Build something from nothing. His eyes filled with tears. But admitting that meant admitting I'd been wrong. About you. About my father. About a lot of things. Mom reached for his hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. I'm not good at being wrong, he continued, with a weak attempt at a smile. Ask your mother. It's his worst quality, she agreed, with a watery smile of her own. Something was shifting in the room, some tectonic movement in our family geology. I felt it but couldn't quite believe it. Jason cleared his throat. So what happens now? He asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Now we try something new, I said. Honesty. Accountability. Respect. For everyone. I looked at each of them in turn. I don't want to control anyone's life. I don't want revenge or power. I just want us to stop pretending, stop enabling, and start being a real family. Dad reached for the rental agreement with a shaking hand. I'll read this, he said. And I'll think about what you said. What you've both said. He glanced at Mom, who gave him an encouraging nod. "That's all I ask," I replied. We moved to the dining table after that, the conversation gradually shifting to less charged topics. By dessert, Mom was asking genuine questions about my business. Jason was discussing his app idea in more realistic terms. Dad was mostly quiet, but I caught him watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, something like recognition. It wasn't a Hollywood reconciliation. There was no group hug, no tearful declarations of unconditional love. But it was a beginning, messy, imperfect, and authentic. As they were leaving, Dad hung back after Mom and Jason had gone down to the car. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." "Thank you," I replied, not trusting myself to say more. He nodded once, then turned to go, pausing at the elevator. "Your grandfather would be proud. He always said you'd surprise us all someday." "Did he?" "He did." Dad's smile was sad but genuine. Turns out he was right about that too. As the elevator doors closed, I realized I was crying again. But this time, I understood exactly why. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have predicted the day of Dad's birthday party. The formal rental agreement was signed by both my parents after a few minor negotiations. Mom insisted on a slight increase in rent to make it feel less like charity. Dad requested first right of refusal if I ever decided to sell the property. I agreed to both conditions without hesitation. The more significant changes were in our family dynamics. Weekly family dinners became a new tradition, sometimes at my condo, sometimes at their house, occasionally at a restaurant halfway between. We were learning to talk to each other, really talk, without the old patterns of avoidance and assumption. Dad made efforts I never expected. He asked questions about my business, listened to the answers, even asked for my opinion on his retirement portfolio. Small gestures, perhaps, but revolutionary in our context. When he proudly introduced me as my daughter, the real estate investor, to an old colleague we ran into at a restaurant, I nearly choked on my water. Mom found her voice in ways that surprised us all. She enrolled in a community college art class she'd been interested in for years, but had never pursued. She started expressing opinions during family discussions rather than simply mediating between the rest of us. She and I developed a habit of meeting for coffee every other week, just the two of us, building the relationship we should have had years ago. As for Jason, his transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. After initially resisting the new family order, he gradually embraced the structure and accountability it provided. He shelved the app idea after conducting market research that revealed significant competition. Instead, he focused on developing skills in digital marketing, an area where he had genuine talent. When he presented me with a proper business plan 3 months later, not for a grandiose new venture, but for a modest social media management service targeting local businesses, I was impressed and to provide seed funding as a legitimate investment. He was meeting his first quarter projections and had acquired 6 clients, including Eleanor's firm. "He's actually quite good at this," she admitted to me after he revamped her company's online presence. Who would have thought? My own life expanded in unexpected ways. The weight of family secrets lifted. I found myself more open to other relationships. I started dating Thomas, an architect I'd met through a property renovation project. I agreed to teach a guest seminar at my alma mater on women in real estate investment. I even took my first real vacation in years, 2 weeks in Portugal, completely disconnected from work. The biggest change, however, was internal. The anger and resentment I'd carried for so long gradually began to fade, replaced by something more complex but infinitely lighter. Not forgetting, but forgiving. Not erasing the past, but refusing to let it dictate the future. On the 1-year anniversary of the backyard confrontation, we gathered at my parents' house, my house, though that distinction mattered less now, for a different kind of celebration. Dad's retirement party. As I watched him accept congratulations from friends and colleagues, I reflected on our journey. He was not a perfect father. He would never be a perfect father. But he was trying to be a better one, and that counted for something. Penny for your thoughts? Mom asked, joining me on the porch swing. Just thinking about how much has changed in a year. She nodded, looking out at the backyard where Dad was showing off his new grill to several neighbors. He's different with you now. I notice it all the time. We're all different, I pointed out. You most of all. She smiled, finding my voice at 62. Better late than never, I suppose. Much better. Jason emerged from the house carrying a tray of drinks. He distributed them efficiently, charming the guests with easy conversation. No desperate pitches, no schemes, just genuine connection. Did you ever imagine we could get here? Mom asked softly. Honestly? No. I watched as Dad caught my eye across the yard and raised his glass in a small, private toast. But I'm glad we did. The truth was, financial independence had given me many things: security, options, autonomy. But it couldn't give me what I'd really wanted all along: a family that saw me, respected me, valued me for who I was. That had required something money couldn't buy: courage to speak the truth, even when it hurt. Willingness to forgive, even when it wasn't earned. Patience to build something new from the broken pieces of the old. In the year since that explosive birthday party, I'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in property portfolios or investment returns. It was measured in relationships healed, truths spoken, and boundaries respected. It was measured in the strength to stand firm in your worth while still offering others the chance to change. The house that had once been the setting for so much pain had become something else entirely, a symbol of transformation. Not because of who owned it, but because of how we'd all grown within its walls. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing in my old bedroom, now a guest room decorated in neutral tones. The twin bed where I dreamed of escape was gone, replaced by a comfortable queen. The posters and photographs had long since been taken down. But the view from the window was the same: the maple tree, the corner of the neighbor's roof, the distant church spire. Dad appeared in the doorway. Everyone's gone except Jason and Emma. Your mom's making coffee. I'll be right down. He hesitated, then entered the room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. You know, we don't have to keep renting from you. We've been talking about downsizing anyway, maybe a condo closer to town. Is that what you want? He considered the question carefully. What I want is to not feel like we're a burden to you. You're not, I said honestly. The house is a good investment, with or without you in it. But more importantly, it's your home. You raised your family here. You should stay as long as you want to. He nodded, emotion crossing his face. Thank you, Natalie, for everything. As we walked downstairs together, I realized that this moment of mutual respect, of honest communication, was what I'd been working toward all those years. Not revenge, not vindication, but reconciliation on equal terms. My journey from the overlooked daughter to the family's secret savior to simply Natalie, daughter, sister, successful woman in her own right, had been longer and more complicated than I ever expected. But standing in the kitchen with my imperfect, evolving family, I knew it had been worth every step. Life doesn't always give us the family we deserve. Sometimes we have to create it ourselves, not by walking away, but by standing firm in our truth and offering others the chance to meet us there. Sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries that allow everyone to grow. Sometimes the most powerful words aren't, "I was right all along, but we can do better from here." What's your story of standing in your truth? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family to protect yourself? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most beautiful transformations. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to speak your truth with both strength and compassion.